Hello. Hi guys. Hi friends. I wanted to share a little story with you guys today. Something that I've been thinking about for a while, and I thought it was worth sharing. So it's a story of my pregnancy and how I became a mom in my 40s, and I wanted to share some experiences that I had along the way, because it's something that I think a lot of women might go through, and I think it's important to start changing the narrative about women getting pregnant and having babies later on in life. I think we've always heard that it's not a good thing, that first we hear that it's almost impossible after 35, that your chances of getting pregnant like plummet every single year. I remember seeing the statistics, at 36 this is the percentage, at 37, so in your 40s you're literally like at 2%. It's really, really low. So we hear that, and then we hear that if you do get pregnant, your baby's not going to be well, right? And nobody wants that. So what do they say? Again, the chances of you having a baby with Down syndrome and all sorts of complications just completely rise. And so I think this again discourages a lot of women to even think about having either any babies or more babies at this age. And I think it's really sad, because my experience was completely, obviously different, and I have a very positive experience, and I'm actually really glad that I waited. I'm glad that I am a mom now, and that I never became a mom in my 20s and 30s. I'm actually really, really grateful for that, for many reasons that I can share someday too. But I wanted to share again, the beginning of my journey with this is that in my 30s I started really thinking about this choice of not having kids. In my 20s I was sure I didn't want kids, and then in my 30s I started just contemplating the idea. It's a big decision, big life altering decision, and so I thought I better make this choice, but a very conscious choice. So I started really reflecting and thinking about what I really wanted. And even after all that thinking, I was still 50-50. So emotionally, I was 50-50. I was like, if I have a baby someday, great, cool, let's, try that. And if I don't, I'm perfectly fine, I thought, without one. So I was right in the middle. Again, some days I'd be like, maybe it is something I want. And then some days I was like, oh, love my life. Not something I want. So again, 50-50. So I started with asking my doctor. I thought, what, let's just see where we're at. So I go to my doctor at the time, male doctor, and I said, hey, what are the chances that I could get pregnant? And his response was horrible. Again, now that I think about it, I'm like, gosh, if I was this woman that really wanted a baby, I think it would have been heartbreaking, because literally his response was, he kind of chuckled and said, like, not at your age. That was his response. And I mean, again, I was like, well, okay, there's my choice. I didn't have to make it. But no kind of hope, no kind of encouragement, just very dry, very, looking at my, my blood work and stuff. And he's just like, no, at your age, it's almost impossible. Naturally, of course, and I really wasn't looking into anything like IVF or anything. Nothing wrong with that. I just was like, I didn't want it that much to go that route. So I was like, well, okay, well, thank you. That was in my late 30s. And then, so a couple years later, like 2 years later, Joe and I, talked about this, of course, many times. Joe had said he would like to have a child with me. But he was also okay if we didn't. He was also, fine. As I had told him several times, it's probably not something that I would want, or that I even could, And it's funny because his reaction, I kind of wish I had taken his optimism a little more. He was like, why? I'm like, because of my age. And he's like, oh, okay. Like, I guess, guys don't think about these things, And I was like, dude, I'm in my 40s. Like, that's impossible, right? That's what I told him. So anyway, moving forward, one of our last discussions we had about this, I said, what, let's try it. What if I get off birth control, and me being adventurous, and I'm like, let's just see what happens. So December of 2024, I stopped taking my pill. I had been on the pill for many, many years. That's another thing you hear. If you're on the pill for a long time, it's going to take you a whole long time. So I was like, by the time this, clears out, I've been on birth control since I was like 18. So anyway, I thought, let's just get off and we'll see what happens, Tell me why, what is it, April-ish? I start feeling weird. I start feeling off. I'm sick. Not sick. I'm just like tired, exhausted. And, I'm thinking, well, I guess this is menopause. This is, what people feel. And I thought, well, like, I guess this is my life now. I've always been, energetic and pretty good feeling. But I thought, well, like, that's what, getting older. And so anyway, I thought this was just part of life now. I started with this like intense hunger. And, I've always been real good about controlling that. Not always, but the last, maybe 10-15 years, I would eat and then like within 2 hours I was like starving, and that's just not like me. So I remember thinking, oh, I think I have a tapeworm. I would say, like, this must be, something wrong. So I was like, I have to go get it checked. I have to go to the doctor and, just talk about, I thought my hormones are off, all this. I thought all these things. Another thing I felt, I couldn't breathe. My sports bras that I've worn forever wouldn't fit me. I would take them off and be like, oh, and I remember just throwing some away and being like, fuck these bras, and funny enough, again, I'm talking to Joe and I'm like, I think my boobs are getting bigger, or I was like, what, I've been doing a lot of back exercises. I'm like, do you think my back's getting like bigger, like muscular? And of course, he's like, oh yeah, your back is looking muscular. I'm like, that it must be that. So again, I thought all these other things until one day I'm sitting like at my office, probably between clients, and I'm thinking, wait, I don't think I've had my period in a few months, and not something that I really thought about much. And so I thought, okay, and so I put all these things together and I thought, oh, what if I'm pregnant? And I'm like, no. Again, the doctor's response comes to my mind, and I'm like, no, especially not this fast, like, no way. So I decided to stop at like a Dollar General. I buy pregnancy test, and I thought, let's just rule it out. I had a trip coming up, an all-inclusive, all drink, and all you can drink trip coming up in May. And this was already towards May, or in mid-May, and that I was like, I need to know what's wrong before I go on this trip, right? And I'm like, and if it's that, well, I definitely need to know, before I go and drink nonstop for a few days. So I thought, okay, let me just take this test. We'll rule that out. And when I get back, this is exactly my thought process. When I get back, I'll go to the doctor and we'll see what's going on with this tapeworm, and sorry, baby. If you ever watch this, anyway, so I take this test literally between clients. I'm like, let's just get a no and whatever. And I see it, and it's positive. And I'm like, well, I didn't have time to process. I was like, oh, my client's here. Let me just focus on that. And I'm real good at just like focusing on my clients. My stuff is not even present. So I'm like, I'll deal with this later. So afterwards, I'm driving home and I'm just like, holy shit. I'm like, and this is why I want to share this right here. This is the reason why. Because instead of being like excited and happy and just thrilled as I should have been. I was scared. I was so scared. Because I literally felt like irresponsible. Like, how dare I? I thought, like, there's no way that this is gonna be okay, because of all the shit that we hear. I thought, again, if I am pregnant, something's gonna be wrong, and so that's where I wish that all these voices had not come to my head, and I wish I could have just been more just excited, just thrilled and happy and hopeful. And although I did experience some of that, but it was through others. I would see other people's reactions and they were so excited for me, and I was like, aren't you scared? Like, what do you mean? And my mom, my sister, don't be scared, because that's all I kept telling them. I was like, I'm just scared. So yeah, thanks to my family and Joe that kept the optimism, and I tried my best to just be hopeful, and whatever it is, it is. I thought if there's something wrong, we'll handle that, and of course, you hope not. So I go to my first appointment, and good thing that this doctor, at this point I was very, very choosy about my doctor and who I was gonna go with. I definitely wanted somebody that I could connect with and feel comfortable with, so I was willing to shop. And anyway, I had a procedure with another female doctor in the past, and I thought, okay, I want her. She was available. Oh, that was great. So all these little signs started coming, positive ones, and I'm a big believer in signs, and anyway, so I go to my first appointment, and the lady, of course, I mean, it's me. I come in with like, what do you mean? Like, is everything okay? Like, what's gonna happen? And high risk. I mean, I'm thinking all these things, and the nurse, it was a nurse practitioner at the time, she said, Iris, many women your age go on to have happy and healthy pregnancies. I was like, really? What? How come nobody's told me this? And so we go to our first appointments. Everything's looking good. I'm feeling good. Once that initial couple of weeks, I start feeling great. I start feeling normal. Yes, of course, all the symptoms, but I never felt horrible. I felt fine. So that was always a good sign. I was like, wow, I feel good. I feel like things are moving along. But then there was always that little voice of like, you never know. Before every appointment, I remember just telling Joe, are you ready? Like, are you gonna be okay if we get bad news? And again, he'd be like, why would we get bad news? I'm like, I don't know, because we might. And he'd like, no, it's fine. And so and if y'all know me, I'm not a fearful person. And so this whole experience, just took me out of my own comfort. And so every appointment was just very positive, very hopeful, very beautiful. And my whole pregnancy was that way. Of course, towards the end, yes, you're uncomfortable, you can't sleep, and I had restless leg syndrome, and I had stuff, but none of that is bad. None of that, it's just part of it. Your body's going through so much, there's so much. So yeah, none of that again is unbearable. It's all worth it. It's all worth it. And I mean, my delivery was, oh gosh, I kept asking the universe. I'm always talking to the universe, and I do believe the universe listens and provides exactly what you need. I kept asking for an eventful birth. I was like, I just don't, I mean, it's traumatic to begin with, but I just didn't want something horrible. And it was as uneventful as possible. My baby came effortlessly. And you know, it wasn't until I heard his little cry, that first little cry, that I literally at that moment said, okay, we're having a baby. Like, we have a baby. Every other month before that, it was like, oh, we're having a baby, maybe. Or, oh, we're having a baby, hopefully. It wasn't until I heard his little cry that I was like, oh, he's here, and he's alive, and he's screaming, and he needs me, and it was just so beautiful, and it's been so beautiful, and he's amazing, he's wonderful, he's perfect, and I just wish more women knew that it was okay, you know, that it's actually fine to have a baby at this age, that it's actually beautiful, that I got to live all the things I wanted to live in my 20s and my 30s, and right now I have nothing else to do, I have nothing else going on, and it's perfect. I'm at home with him. You know, I've set up my life somewhat so I can enjoy this time with him, and just be his mom. And of course I have a beautiful support system, which is wonderful, but again, I've created that throughout my life. I've created so much throughout my life that now it's time to share with him, and I couldn't have done that in my 20s, I couldn't have done that in my 30s. Yeah, I'm really enjoying this, and I wish I would have known that all of that you hear is bullshit. What I think is important, and I'll tell you what I think is extremely important that we don't hear enough of, is your health, your fitness. Like, I have been working on these things, two things, obsessively since 10-15 years ago. Therefore, I think that contributed to me having such an easy pregnancy and a healthy pregnancy. And that's what I'm saying. We don't hear what really can cause, you know, negative things. And it's, I mean, do you ever hear, you know, oh, don't have a baby if you're overweight, don't have a baby if you're underweight, you know, because that, and yet those are risk factors, you know, having, you know, drinking alcohol for forever, you know, eating toxins, I mean, all sorts of stuff. And, you know, I'm not here to judge no one, you know, many people, you know, partake, and I do too in some of these things, of course, you know, but I'm saying overall I'm very health conscious, you know, and I think that is more important than age. So age doesn't matter, I don't think. In my experience, I think health, it matters more than anything. So if you're healthy, I don't think you're in a rush. I don't think we should be rushed, in other words. Take care of your body, nourish it, take care of your mind. That's another thing. I got my mind straight many years ago. I mean, I still work on that every day. You know, we're never done there. But yeah, I worked on, you know, my stress management. And so if you take care of your body and your mind and your soul and your spirit, you can have a healthy pregnancy. And if you don't, I don't care if you're 20, you are at risk. I hope that makes sense. So it's not about age, it's about how you take care of yourself overall. That's my message, is like, take care of your body, it will take care of you back, and that's the most important thing. So anyway, I hope this is helpful or interesting, at least. Anyway, have a good day, guys. I just had to let that out. Bye.